Welcome to Cork City Library. We have just removed our masks, our one city, one book mask, to talk to each other and to talk a little more and in detail about Tadhg Coakley's wonderful book, which is and has been chosen as Cork City Library's One City, One Book. And this is the beautiful book, Whatever It Takes, by Tadhg Coakley. Now, there are many, many things I could tell you about Tadhg Coakley. The most important thing, of course, is that he is a Cork man. That is simply the most important thing in life. The next thing is that he is an excellent writer. Absolutely, the writing in this novel is absolutely terrific. The storyline is brilliantly set out. The structure of the novel is absolutely brilliant. In fact, the novel, as it goes on, mutates into a different character towards about 2/3 the way through the novel. It becomes an absolute thriller of a novel that ignites and catches fire for the reader. It's a very interesting, up to then, it is quite an interesting book, and an interesting book in terms of both crime and character study. But before I talk too much, I just want to ask Tadhg Coakley to read his first extract from the novel. Tadhg.
Thanks very much, Tom, and special thanks to Patricia Looney and Cork City Libraries for nominating Whatever It Takes as the 2020 One City, One Book. I'm absolutely thrilled. Thanks to Creative Ireland and Waterstones Cork for supporting it. Special thanks tonight to Lord Mayor for his wonderful speech, for his presence first of all. It's really wonderful to have you here. Kieran, thank you so much, and your speech was very, very moving, I have to say. It's also very special for me to be here tonight because at the age of 22, 37 years ago, I walked through the door up there of the Central Library in the Grand Parade as a library assistant. And I never thought, walking through that door, that I'd ever have a book, or two books, or I'd ever have a book on the shelves of this library, being borrowed and being promoted by the library in the One City, One Book, so I'm absolutely thrilled. So I'm going to read a short extract from the book. It's about 1/3 of the way through the book, and the protagonist, Collins, is on a break. He's a detective, Garda detective, and he's on a break from work, which was imposed on him for reasons I won't say. And he walks the city, decides to walk the whole length of the city from Blackrock Castle to the Lee Fields with his girlfriend Violette, who's a French woman. And after the walk, they decide to go for a drink in a pub in one of the quays. And Violette goes outside for a cigarette. She's French, so she smokes. And a young man approaches her and said, "Is that Tim Collins with you?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "Can I have a selfie with him?" Because in the previous life, Tim Collins was an intercounty hurler, a very famous hurler. He captained Cork. And Violette brings him in and they have a selfie, and then she berates Collins for not telling her that he was this famous hurler. So that's where we start here. She shook her head. "You are so strange, Collins. Most men would be boasting about this all the day long. Why not you?" "I don't know. It was a long time ago, Violette. It's over and done with." "Not to him," she explained, pointing. I know. I was getting some therapy early last year for a while after a case. I had post-traumatic stress after I'd encountered this murderer, a serial killer. Anyway, he continued, not meeting her gaze. The psychotherapist kept asking me about the hurling, and I couldn't understand why. She knew about me and who I was, but she kept bringing me back to when I stopped playing. Collins moved closer to her. He didn't want anyone else to overhear. She said that sometimes a recent trauma rekindles older, more serious traumas that have not been resolved, and they join forces together and attack you en masse. She thought I'd never come to terms with not being able to play hurling anymore, and that's why I didn't talk about it. She said it's common, and the higher level of the sport, especially professional sport, the worse the potential loss. Collins sipped his pint. He was sorry now he'd begun this conversation. I didn't believe her, but I'm not so sure now, he said. So when people like Eamon say nice things about my hurling, yes, it's a validation of sorts, because I often get criticised too, especially about one incident in my career, one match. He got the barman's attention and pointed to the 2 glasses indicating more drinks. What happened, she said. It was in the All-Ireland final of 1997. We had won the previous 2 years and we were going for 3 in a row. That's a big deal, even for Cork. And I had been man of the match the previous 2 years in the final, so a lot was expected of me. Anyway, it was all going well, we were winning by a few points, when early in the second half, one of the Kilkenny backs, defenders, hit me off the ball. What does it mean, Violet asked, off the ball? Well, it means when the ball is not nearby. Sometimes you get hit when you and your opponent are contesting the ball, but this time the ball was well away from us. Collins' delicious point. So anyway, I hit it back, harder, and I knocked him out. Well, he went down and didn't get up. Nothing wrong with him, he was putting it on. But one of the umpires saw me and told the referee and I was sent off. But he hit you first. Yeah, but it doesn't matter if it's not seen. Anyway, we lost the match by 1 point, 1 solitary point. So the blame for it was put on me. And I still get asked to this day, almost 20 years later, why did I hit him? Why could I not just have played on? I wasn't hurt. Collins went to the bar to pay for and collected 2 drinks. The barman said he dropped the Beamish down. What do you say when they ask you, Violet said. Mostly I tell them to mind their own business, but when I do talk to someone I respect about it, a hurling person I mean, I tell them that I had to hit him back. When you're hit, you have to hit back. It's the only way. He thought for a moment, twirling a beer mat on the table. I told you earlier that my father taught me about birds, but he also taught me how to fight. I don't mean physically fighting. He wasn't much good at that, especially when I got bigger with him. I mean any fight, any contest or confrontation. The barman came with the Beamish and the change. He taught me that when you're in the fight, there's only the fight. It's the only thing. And you have to win. You have to. You either win or you lose. There's nothing else. Nothing in between. When it's over, you can move on, but while it's on, it's the only thing. And you cannot lose, whatever it takes. Whatever, she said, whatever it takes.
Brilliant, that's wonderfully done. And that whole backstory about the incident where he more or less cost his team championship is the thing that sort of haunts him in a way. It's part of the backstory of his life. Was that an important aspect of his character, of the character of Collins?
I think it was, and it is also reflected in his actions in the book, because even though his philosophy is you can never back down, you have to do whatever it takes. By doing that, he lost the Cork the All-Ireland. So there's a dichotomy there, which he's aware of. And when he does the things he does in the book as well, he's aware of the complexity of that and the reasons not to do it, but he still goes and does it. You know?
And I feel that in your book, like the interesting thing about a crime novel and the interesting thing about a novel with Gardaí in it, if you like, or any police force, is that police work is teamwork in many ways, and yet you have in the novel the fact that there is also an insider who is actually telling stories to the criminal mastermind who they're trying to put away. So he can't in a way trust everybody, but he still has to work with the team.
Yeah,
that's a very interesting aspect of
the
novel.
And it's part of the dilemma he's in. He needs help, he needs help. Exactly, the Gardaí are completely a team, and when something happens that all the Gardaí have to mobilise to prevent 2 young people being hurt, he realises he can't share a lot of the information he knows with other people within the station, because one of them potentially is passing on information. Even his partner June that he questioned at one point as well, So and it's part of the book is about a struggle, really, an internal struggle with him. I mean, there are external struggles against crime and all that, but it's an internal struggle. That's what I wanted to explore in the character.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have done it very well. And in a way, in all of fiction, in all of crime fiction, where you have a character-driven crime series, there's always the detective both with flaws and backstories. And I think you've painted it very well in the character of Collins. But you've painted it also with humour. I thought there's a brilliant part of the novel where they're actually doing the briefing before a major act, before they do a simultaneous raid on 9 different locations, criminal locations. It's very tense in the incident room. And Collins asks, in doing the briefing, asks the room, has anybody got a question? Of course, some chancer of a detective at the back says, yeah, I have. Why were you sent off against us again in 97? And there's that kind of slagging, that kind of masculine world, I think, in a team, in a kind of a series of incidents where men are coming and going, that kind of slagging. I think you have painted that very, very well. Did you get that from your own, like, I should say to people who may not know you, but I think most people who are interested in writing in Cork City at least will know you now. But your own background is very, very interesting. Your backstory is interesting. I mean, you come from a family which has a tradition of athletics. I mean, your grandfather was the All-Ireland mile champion, the famous J.J. Corbett, John Corbett of Ween, was a very famous miler in his day, in the years at the beginning of the 20th century. Your older brother was an All-Ireland member of the Cork All-Ireland minor team, as you were, winning All-Ireland minors with Cork. You were together, you were with fantastic players from St. Coleman's in the Hartley Cups, and UCC players, you know, in Fitzgibbon Cups. So teams are really an important part of your life, aren't they?
Yeah, and you know, I mean, every Garda, every detective in any country would say, you know, policing is teamwork. Like health work is teamwork, all these critical services are absolutely teamwork. But there comes a time as well, maybe when some character has to go above and beyond just being a team member and to put their neck on the plate and step up and do something extraordinary. And you do see that in teams as well. Everyone has to do their bit, but every so often one of the players does something extraordinary.
Yeah.
And the whole team then is lifted by that as well. So while Collins has an interesting relationship with his colleagues in the Gardaí, at the same time he's admired because people know when push comes to shove, he will put his neck out and he will put himself in danger, and he does in this book, you know, several times.
It's interesting as well, I feel that teamwork is also part of your writing life. You're very involved in various teams of writers in Cork City and in groups, and you decided at an early stage to do the master's degree, a very, very successful master's degree program at UCC, which has produced absolutely fantastic writers and writing in recent years. So is that your belief even in the writing world? You haven't been acting as a loner, you've been acting as a member almost of a team.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and it's funny because people think of writers as solitary creatures and everything, but one of the great benefits I had when I went to UCC to do the MA was that I was part of a community of writers, and you know, a shared problem is a problem halved really, and I felt part of the community there, and I still feel part of the community of writers in Cork or elsewhere. And of course, you know, libraries, this is the cathedral then where writers ultimately, if they're lucky, end up both as readers and as writers. But yeah, it absolutely is, you know, you do have to sit down on your own, you have to put the black on white, as Frank O'Connor said. But then, you know, I'm part of a writers group, I try to support other writers, we're all in this together really, you know, it is a shared, as the Lord Mayor said, this is a shared struggle, and culture is about groups coming together, which is why galleries, libraries, all these places are so important. And one of the main things we missed, of course, you know, because of lockdown and everything, is being with other
Meeting
writers.
each other, yeah, that's absolutely true. In terms of your book, Whatever It Takes, did the actual experience of going to the postgraduate, the UCC postgraduate, courses and that, did that affect the way you assembled the narrative?
It did actually. It did. And the Lord Mayor mentioned earlier that I had written it in the first person. It was very much kind of down these main streets of lonely members go, I did this, I did that. And in the MA, I wrote a book, part of a book called The First Sunday in September, which is really a book of interlinked short stories, 18 stories with 18 characters. And I realised from writing that if you have a polyphonic book like that with many different voices, people actually can see lots of different ways of looking at things. Whereas if you have one character, you're tied with them. You can't have scenes where they're not involved. You can't see other points of view. So, for example, some of the characters in this book, and there are 10 different major characters whose points of view are put forward. I wanted to write about people, families who are affected by drugs, people who are affected by crime, victims of crime. You know, there are criminals in there as well as Collins, of course, the detective. But I wanted to have that spectrum of views and life experiences, really, and I think it enlarged the book and it enriched the book for me.
Yeah. So this book in particular, this is one of a series of what's going to be a series, during which, like, you'll not only have crimes solved, murders solved, drug importations solved, but in fact will probably be, I would guess myself, will probably be an exploration further of Detective Collins, of his character.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I realised, when I was young, reading books, by people like Richard Ford, that the one thing that I was interested in was character. If you take his book, The Sport Drive, for example, very little happens in that book, but it's an exploration of character and change and development. And, in the follow-on book to this, it's not really going to be a gangland book in any way, really. It's going to be exploring other aspects of Collins' life, his relationship. He will have a new partner in the Gardaí, a woman again, who will challenge him, and he'll have to step up to that. There will be other relationships and so on. So, and I think readers want that, really. They want to feel for the characters that they're reading about. I'm never going to write a book like Agatha Christie with very intricate plots and who did it and all that, really, but I'm not really interested in that. But I am interested in developing characters, and some of the characters in this book will be carried forward as well, and they will change and develop too, so that's the plan. Yeah.
Is the Dom Molloy, is he in the earlier book or in your next book?
No comment. I can't disclose any of those things.
Very good.
But there will be a bad guy for sure, and an antagonist for sure. Yeah.
Was it important for you to put Collins into a situation where, in a way, he could trust no one at some stage?
Yeah, it was, because eventually we all have to make personal decisions that we may prefer not to make, and he had to make kind of decisions and take on this criminal gang on his own in a certain way, and he had to be challenged as well. There's no point in having a character and having him have nice experiences and lovely relationships, because people don't want to read those books. They write white and they read white. You need tension. The two things that Claire Keegan teaches us as writers is that the two things you need in a book, in a novel or a short story, are time. You have to have a narrative arc, and tension. So, and especially there are scenes in this book where the reader knows what's going to happen. For example, that something is going to happen against Collins. Collins doesn't know it, but the reader feels the tension. Collins may not feel it, but the reader feels it because they know something that he doesn't know. And tension, to me, is a kind of more powerful tool than drama in a way. There is drama, there are, various things happen which are dramatic, but it's the tension before and the kind of fallout and the tension afterwards that really interests me, and I think that's what really interests the reader too.
Also, there is another aspect of Collins' character which kind of struck me, it surprised me when I read it. I mean, he has these kind of angers and unfinished business from the past that he's trying to deal with, but he sees himself as a steady man, as a sort of integrated and steady person, which is a slightly self-deluding, isn't it?
Completely self-deluding, but I think we all have to self-delude to get up in the morning and wash our face and have a shower or shave or whatever, So he does really, and he is adamant that he's right.
Yeah.
And this is the way to do it. And
that's the action of will which comes from his heart.
Exactly, and that he learned from his father actually, who will explore. Possibly in the third book, if there's the third book, it's going to be a prequel.
Yeah.
And his father will come into that, and we'll go back to his younger days and so on, what he learned from his father, that you don't back down, and you know, I'm right, that's it, that's the way. And he is self-delusional in some ways, but on the other hand, he does get results.
Yeah. So, like, one or two just technical things about the writing.
Yeah.
What is your habit of writing? Like, you, in terms of day to day, how do you write?
I get up in the morning fairly early. My wife is sitting on there. She can attest to this.
Is that because she gets up very early?
No, but when I actually retired, one of the things is when I retired from my job as a librarian in CIT, I said if I'm going to write properly, I have to treat it as a job. I have to get up in the morning and go to work. Well, the work is only in the house, it's at a desk. But I get up, make a cup of tea, or go straight to the desk. And usually what happens is that I will have a scene or some scenes written the previous day at the composing level, which is only a small part of the writing process, as you know. And I will reread those, tweak them, do some work with them. I would have already edited them the day before, and then I'll start from there. And I generally try to end the scene, whereas know the next thing that's going to happen. So I can just write that scene and then I'm off again.
So on average, how many hours are you writing a day, would you say?
On a good day, 6, 7. Yeah, I write all the morning. Now, some of that would be in the afternoon. I'd begin to flag. I'd be editing, and of course, at the editing phase, which is about 90% of the craft, yeah, all day long. Really, yeah. And when things are going well, I mean, other things happen as well. And Stephen King, who's written brilliantly on the craft of writing, says we have to write every day, every single day. I don't know if I agree with Stephen. Yeah.
He's one of the wisest on the actual activity of writing, isn't he?
He is, because
his book on writing is
it's absolutely brilliant. And of course, that book is a lot of it is about his own addiction problems and how he almost lost writing to addiction, and how he came back and how he treats it so seriously. And you know as well, it's 99% effort. Inspiration is fine, but really the real working is when you have the first draft, or as Stephen King calls it, a zero draft, which you've written for yourself. Then the real work happens, and then the real crafting for the reader happens. And that's a slog, but it has to be done.
And are you scoping out the entire novel before you begin it? Do you know the entire arc of the story?
No, I don't. A lot of crime writers do it that way. I don't. There are two types of writers really. You have the architects who plan everything out, every little detail, they draw it all out, and then they follow that plan. I'm a gardener, the type of a writer. I plant something, see if it grows, plant it beside it, see how they work in relation to each other, and then I develop, and then I may move it all around later.
So are you losing a lot of stuff all the time? Are you casting it aside?
I am really, yeah. And sometimes it's the best stuff. It's the stuff I think, oh, that's a really nice sentence. It doesn't have any business there. It could be lovely flora, it's affecting the real important stuff. You have to get rid of it. You have to kill your darlings, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of that literature, anyway. Also, I feel that there will be people watching this, hopefully, who are interested in writing as well as reading. And I would emphasize that people should read this book, whatever it takes, because it is an absolutely brilliant, it's an entertaining book, it's an interesting book, both in terms of character development and because it is a damn good story. But also because of the topography of Cork in it, which you delineate brilliantly. And I mean, it's obvious from the writing that you've spent a lot of time walking around the city of Cork. You know the smallest lanes and the byways and the highways of this city. But if somebody's watching this who is interested in writing, what are the fundamental things they should do in order to begin?
Well, there are a few things. First of all, sit down and start writing. Now, that's easier said than done, and a lot of people have difficult lives and they have jobs and commitments and families and so on. But you know, you can grab a moment here and a moment there. J.K. Rowling wrote some of the first Harry Potter book in a cafe with a baby in a buggy beside her. And so that is the important thing. You have to get black and white, as Frank O'Connor said. Now, I think being a part of a community of writers, for example, a lot of the libraries in Cork and in other areas have writer groups. So join a writers group, then you're forced to show your material to other people. That's a big step. They will critique it. You'll be reading what they do. You'll see what they do well and what they don't. Reading is a huge part of it, and that's one of the reasons I'm so proud to be, my book is the One City, One Book, because it's to promote reading. The one skill a writer has to have is to be a good reader. So read as much as you can, try to get into a community of writers, listen to other writers, meet them, go to events, a lot of festivals here in Cork, for example, and then we'll be restarting again hopefully soon. And get stuck in really, and don't put it off if you can at all.
Thanks, Tadhg. Tadhg, would you now read maybe just another extract from the book, because I think the book speaks for itself in its own kind of individual way, and that's the relationship I think the readers will have with this fantastic fiction published by Mercier Press.
Thanks again, Tom. I really appreciate it, and thanks again to Cork City Libraries, and especially thanks to Mercier Press and Deirdre Roberts for publishing this book. I'm really thrilled to see it out there. So this is a short piece, around halfway through the book. And as you said, Tom, the first half of the book really it's a crime novel. It's about character development, it's about struggle, and there are physical struggles and battles going on the streets and internal struggles. Then it kind of morphs more into a thriller where there's danger and the pace is upped a lot. I kicked on at the pace in the second half of it very much, really. So Collins is back at work. He's in the station, he's on desk duty, he's not on active duty yet, and a report of an abduction comes into the station, and the Garda go to the scene. And when Collins comes into the station one day, he sees a group of detectives in the incident room around a phone, a speakerphone, and they're led by the senior detective Clancy, and the word comes in that 2 young people have been abducted. There's a witness who's Spanish, and he describes one of the men as being 2 meters tall. And this is an important fact for Collins. So thanks again, Tom. Thanks to Cork City Libraries. So Clancy is speaking here, and he's a rival of Collins. Clancy reasserted himself again. Bring him in. We need to quiz him a bit more and get Finbar to stay and organise the door-to-door. We need his prints too. I'm sending June and Michael. June is Collins' partner. I'm sending June and Michael out there now with the tech gang. Don't touch anything, will you? Did you go through the backpack? I did, yeah. Any ID? There's 2. An ATM card with the name Claire Halvey and a UCC ID card with the name Laura Moore. I'd say that's fake. They all have fake IDs to get into clubs and stuff. Something in the name Halvey made Collins' attention prick up. He moved closer to the phone. Jim, will you ask him how much over 2 meters the big guy was? Collins said. Clancy scowled at him again. There was a pause. He doesn't know, but he was over 2 meters for sure. Could be 6'8", Collins said quietly. He looked meaningfully at June. No way, Collins, said June. What? Said Clancy. Collins thinks it could be Corcoran. I didn't say anything, Collins said. How many men that tall are out there capable of something like this? We don't even know what happened yet, Clancy said. He stood up and stretched. Let alone speculate who could have done it. And Collins, last time I checked, you were on desk duty. Collins glared at him. Clancy laughed and pointed his thumb towards the door. Out. Collins left the room. When June arrived at her desk to get her bag and coat, he was sitting in her chair. What's that for Christmas? He said. Collins, don't start. And no, I'm not going to keep you in the loop. Get out of my chair. Collins shook his head rightly. I wasn't going to ask you that. Yes, you were, and the answer is no. You're on desk duty for another month at least. And Collins? She paused to put on her coat. Not everything is down to Molloy. This whole thing is probably nothing, some student prank. Would you just let me know who she is? That name rings a bell. She looked at him. I don't know, she said, walking away. Maybe. It was good enough for him. It smelled like something. 2 meters. He returned to his desk and switched on the computer. 2 email responses to inquiries he had made about foreign investments in the Cayman Islands accounts, neither of which was of any use. He was reading a report on offshore banking when he had an idea. Halvey was an unusual name in Cork, and so he looked it up on the online phone book. There was only one Halvey family in the city. His eyes widened when he saw the address. Wow, he said. June burst into the office. She rushed to Collins. "It's Mickey McMahon's young fella." "What?" "The boy who was abducted. He's Mickey McMahon's young fella, David." Collins stared at her. "Maloney," whispered.
Hi, thanks very much. And that begins one of the most important actions in the entire novel. Hi, thanks very much. Congratulations again on being selected and having your book, whatever it takes, selected for One City, One Book in Cork. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks so much.